Welcome to my TED Talk that nobody asked for, but if you follow me, you know that every year in July, I always try to do a little update of what the past year has been like in having a business. I became an entrepreneur and started my business for the first time in July 2021. And ever since then, I really diligently tracked and journaled and been reflective about my unique experience, which may resonate for you. Every year, I do a little bit of a different update on what my experience has been. And there's that quote, some years ask questions and some years give answers. I think that's also very true in business. I have several drafts of an update on Substack that I just have not pressed on, different angles and ways to encapsulate and summarize the kind of year that I've had and what I've learned. And it just was not flowing the way that it does most years. And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to just make a video this year and put it out, and that can be my update to hold to my commitment to myself. Last year, I did a little bit of an update on tools for being an entrepreneur. And I think it's really interesting because as this is my fourth year, and as time goes on, I realize more and more that business is not really about business. Business is about the individual in the business. So whether you're running the business or working at a business or whatever size your business is, it really does come down to how you are as a human being and what your temperament is and what your sort of emotional and internal state is like. And I think that your external state really does reflect that. That may be woo-woo to some people, but that's what I believe and what my experience has been. And so in thinking about just sort of the combination of things that I have really been focused on in the past year and things that I believe are really helpful in business, there's four things. The first is to be authentic and seek alignment as an individual. So this has been super interesting for me, this process. I started my business in a time in my life where I was not very sure of who I was. I had allowed external influences to really dictate and decide who I was, what my priorities were. And so for the first few years of my business, to be honest, I don't know if I really knew who I was. I was still growing up. I think we're all still growing up. I'm still growing up myself, and hopefully all of you are too, because that means you're improving. But when somebody said be authentic and seek alignment, if somebody said that to me, I don't even know what I would have thought that was for me at that time. And so I think that even if you're not there where you know what your authentic self is or what your alignment is or what you want to be aligned to, I think that the work of discovering that and unpacking that is really important in having a business. And I think that's a sort of lifelong and ongoing pursuit. But I think asking yourself and being critical of what it is that you want out of your life and your business and what are the actions that are going to align you to that is so important, because in the beginning of your business, you can say yes to everything because you're focused on getting out there, creating revenue, whatever you're focused on. You obviously want to succeed, but I think there are so many different ways to succeed in business and in life that if you don't have a solid idea of what that is, you can be taken in a lot of directions and really let off track. So I think that's a really important point, or it has been for me at least. So that's number one, to be authentic and seek alignment. I think number two is this concept of radical accountability and responsibility. Now, this can be a controversial take for some people. I have really found that in my life, in my business life, and in my personal life, having the mentality of everything being your responsibility or being accountable for everything that happens in your life is a really freeing concept, because all of a sudden, when you are able to be radically accountable and be somebody who believes that they are in control or have access to change things in their life, I think that it all just becomes a matter of choices that you want to make and trade-offs and prioritization in your life. I think being somebody who feels and knows that they can make a change is more powerful than being somebody to whom things are just happening. And of course, I understand that everybody has very unique circumstances and that this can be really tough. But I think if you've read books like Man's Search for Meaning and other books like this, I think that we don't always control what's happening to us, but we can control how we deal with it. And this is something that I'm constantly working on. I still struggle with this quite a lot, but I think it's what's really shifted for me in the business is understanding that I actually have the ability to make all of the decisions that are happening in the business and in my life, and that all of those decisions have consequences, good or bad. But ultimately, it is my choice of which ones I'm going to endure, change, act on, ignore for now, and come back to later. That's been really empowering for me. Number two, just being radically accountable and really believing that everything is your responsibility and accountability, and within your power, you really do empower and lift yourself to say, hey, I actually can be different or change or adjust things if I want to. I think the third point that has been really important for me, and I'm still learning this one a lot as well, is to be your own cheerleader. I can't speak for the experience of men or millennial men, but I'm a millennial woman, and I think that so many of us grew up being told to do things to impress or get the approval of other people. And this is on a range of different topics, but certainly in business, you were really rewarded for not causing problems, not being a diva, blending in, being grateful for being there. I think some of those things are important, but I also think that creates a situation where you need approval and recognition of other people in order to give you permission to do what you're doing. I think that if you do have a strong sense of alignment and authenticity and you are unapologetically accountable and responsible for yourself, that you can actually create a situation where you're your own cheerleader because you measure success against the metrics that you created for yourself, not the metrics that your sector or your friends or your family or people who have come before you have, but for what you actually want. I think for me in my life, at least, that's success for me. Success is getting to choose what I am going to hold myself accountable to and what I'm going to work on and the hard problems that I'm going to solve. And then congratulating myself when I do those things. I think there are so many things that we do just to get the approval of other people and to get the recognition of other people in business. And I really tried to avoid this because I'm trying to do something different with MC Consulting and Pocket Lobbyist. And I'm trying to do something that is authentic to the way that I operate and the vision that I have. And so I've been really deliberate and thoughtful about how I do that. And that doesn't always elicit congratulations from people. Sometimes the decisions that I make in my business are confusing to people, or they don't understand them, or they judge them, or they think that they should be one way or another. But at the end of the day, I wake up and I am the one who gets to decide whether or not I'm happy with how I am being in my business, in my personal life, with friends, with family, with others. And I'm the one who gets to decide whether or not I'm okay with that. I think that has really helped me individually to move away from doing things to impress or please other people or to have any sense of outsourcing approval. And I think that, I don't know if different for men or women, I've heard it is, but that's been a really big leap for me is I do and measure myself against my metrics, and the rest, if you're getting that external recognition, it's obviously very nice and I really like it, but I also think we can fall into a trap of getting recognition for things that are not aligned to us. And then we end up doing things because we're good for them, but they're not good for us. And I think that when you do commit to being your own cheerleader, that can dissipate. I think it can be a better situation. So being your own cheerleader is number 3. I think that number 4, and this one is probably something that has actually been true for me each year that I've reflected on my business, but is definitely true as you get into the thick of it when you're not a new novel concept anymore. You're growing and you have different cost pressures, different responsibility pressures, leadership pressures. You want to be there and do the best that you can for the people and the community that you've created. I think that the fourth thing is just the unwavering commitment to consistency and not giving up. The more business books I read, the more biographies on people who have been really successful that I read, which is probably one of my favorite category of book, is just one more try, one more step up to the plate, one more swing, like one more year, one more day of just trying to put one foot in front of the other. I think that people are not honest about how hard that is sometimes. I have been through periods in my business where it has felt like just despair because of how hard you're trying and how much it's not working. And that doesn't need to just be financial. The times that I've had the hardest in my business have actually been the best financial times because it's about alignment of finding the right staff, finding people who are going to be loyal to you and understand you and sharing your vision, and finding clients and working with people that are going to reflect what your alignment is. And it's really hard sometimes to keep going when it feels like you've tried everything, but it's not working. I think that part of moving away from perfectionism for me personally and that feeling of overwhelm has really been, it doesn't need to be super pretty to be successful. It doesn't have to be perfect to be worthwhile. I think on those days, on days or weeks or periods where I'm just like, I don't know where to go next and I don't know what the right move is next, I think just the ability to just wake up every day and just try to make some progress and move forward in some way is really important. So I think just being consistent and never giving up is the fourth piece of advice that I've learned. So I think being authentic and having alignment first and foremost, being radically accountable and responsible for your actions and what's going on in your life and in your business, being your own cheerleader and being consistent and never giving up are all really important. I'm by no means perfect or really good at all of these, but I think these are the commitments that I am making to myself going into year 5 of having a business. I know that even though some years have been harder, some time periods have been more difficult, I know without a doubt that every year I get better. I think that is really the crux of what makes a business better, is when the people who are leading it and the people who are making decisions are actively trying to be better human beings and make improvements and move forward, because ultimately the business is really just a reflection of what's going on inside of you, especially in a small business. And so I think just having good energy alignment and being retrospective and introspective on what is working, what's not working, is a really good thing to be doing. Of course, you need to work hard. Of course, you need to put in effort. Of course, you need to have a good idea. You need to be smart. You need to be strategic. You need to be all of those things. But I have found that if you are all of those things, but not somebody who has their wits about them individually and is grounded individually, you might find success, but you won't keep it. You may also find success in a way that doesn't feel great to you or authentic to you. And so for anybody who, I guess, is interested in my journey and what's been going on for me in the past year, that's a little bit of a summary. You can continue to follow along on the journey by following MC Consulting and Pocket Lobbyist. I also have a Substack that I'm going to try to write on more, because I really find writing to be quite cathartic and helpful to me personally and in my business. But I'll cover these topics and others over there. The last thing is just thank you to everybody who has worked with me, supported me, and been somebody that can be there during the past few years. People who do decide to start their own business and run their own business, it's really hard a lot of the time. I think that it can only be done when you feel like you've got people who are rooting for you. I think that those are not going to be all the same people for everybody, and they're not even going to look the same. But thank you, anybody who's been there. I can't wait for what's going to come of the next year, and hopefully it continues to be better and better. So thank you so much. Happy birthday to us, and look forward to connecting with you all over the next year.